Right. Welcome to the Adamas podcast with your host, Yvonne, public speaking consultant.
And Steph, visibility coach, answering all of your public speaking questions every single month.
This is us, Juntas Beyond the Stage. And y'all, we are most definitely beyond the stage today. It is one of those days. We're both having one of those days.
We really
um,
are.
yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We have a few questions to get through, and we're excited to answer them. Steph, I don't know which one we want to start with first. What do you think?
I feel like you have two on your end and I have one on my end. So go ahead and start and then we can alternate.
Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is what systems and tools do you use to organize, operate your business? Steph and I are going to approach it from the lens of being a speaker. Steph, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I can go first. Sure. I'll answer your beautifully worded question, even though it's not yours. There's honestly a lot of systems that I use. I think I'm the kind of person that likes to not overcomplicate the kind of systems that I use. I do invest in some software, some I DIY myself. I really do use like a hybrid combination, but if there's anything that I can DIY or that it's already an all-in-one kind of combination of systems, I try to lean on that. And when it comes to public speaking, one of the things, if you want to call it a system, it's basically a process that I came up with for myself. And I use it very, very, very often. It's actually a Google Doc. And what I went ahead and did is I created a little like map or blueprint that houses all of the key elements that I need for any kind of public speaking opportunity, whether I'm pitching myself, that way I have access to important links to my full professional like biography, to my speaker talks. There's a couple other resources that I have in there like headshots. And it's just so freaking useful because I remember for the longest time, every time I would go ahead and want to pitch myself to go speak at an event or even to do a podcast interview, I would be opening a new tab on my browser every single time. And it'd be like, okay, Instagram.com/Fortin _ let's copy that URL and paste it into the contact information for this pitch. And I'm like, no, like I can't seriously be taking like this extra 5-10 minutes for every single pitch when I could just have it in one document. So I find it funny because it's just such a simple thing that I didn't think about for the longest time. But now if I'm pitching myself or even after, once you get accepted as a public speaker at an event or inside of a community, they often want so much more information about you so that they can help share who you are and what it is that you're going to come talk on inside of the community to their audience, their clients. So it's again such an easy way. It's easy for you, it's easy for the host, and it's just a freaking Google Doc, which I love.
I love that. And take it a step further, right? And have the Google Drive. I think you can store a lot of things on Google. I think also this is a good practice to have, even if you're not a speaker actively looking for speaking engagements with your corporate career or just your career in general. I've always kept a long list of all the projects that you work on because it's your resume. Sometimes as speakers, you forget, oh yeah, I actually did do something with this incredible organization that I kind of forgot about, or this really cool company that I don't even have on my website. And so it's a good reminder to just have a list of all of the even speaking engagements that you've done and the different titles that you've had for them, because those matter too. One thing that I do and that I've started implementing with some of the people that I work with is also I use a Google Doc as well. And the thing is, you can decide to use any platform for this kind of thing. For me, I like Google Doc. I am very simple. I am overwhelmed sometimes by the amount of platforms that I have to use for my business. So I try to simplify it as much as I can. This Excel sheet, well, Google Sheet, whatever, has an overview of all of my speaking engagements for that year. I have one for every single year. It has how many people were in the audience. It has what I talked about, any leads that came from it. If I'm applying for speaking engagements, it's a whole list of what the event is, check mark of where I am in the process. Did I get it? Did I not get it? All of these different kind of metrics that you need as a speaker, because then at the end of the year, or let's say middle of the year, July, you're pitching yourself. You're like, oh, I've already spoken to 541 people this year, right? And that is a metric that if you're asked to speak on it on the spot, you're not gonna be like, oh yeah, I've talked to 541 people to year to date. But if you have this document that says, I spoke at this event, it had 1,000 people on there. I spoke at this one, it had 20 people. I did a workshop, it had 15 people. Then you're able to kind of have those numbers there. And that strengthens your application and strengthens you as a speaker, right? It's not just about the numbers, but it's a combination of your Google Doc and the actual numbers to back it up as well.
Mhm.
Um, and it helps you keep track too of which ones were paid, which ones were unpaid. Then you can go back at the end of your year and say, I probably should be prioritizing paid speaking engagements more. This is how much I made. This is generally what nonprofits are able to pay me. This is generally what corporate companies are able to pay me. So it just gives numbers to what you do.
I love that you actually showed that because I've never really like boasted about my little Excel sheet, and just hearing you talk about all the things that you track, I'm like, yes, this is actually so helpful. And one of the things that I don't honestly track too much of the data, and I should probably get a lot better at that, but one of the things that I do track on my spreadsheet is where they came from. So whether it was a specific social media platform, a piece of content that I put out there, an email pitch from another public speaking engagement. And it's true, like that data is so beneficial because then you can go ahead and figure out, well, how do I want to spend more of my energy going forward? I know when I came back from mat leave, I had spent a couple weeks specifically having fun on Threads, and it was a platform that I had never explored before. And through that, because I was tracking it, I started to realize that a lot of my public speaking opportunities were coming through there at that time, like way in a much higher volume than they had ever come before. And I was like, oh, I'm onto something. So I started going in on that even more and more and more. But I would have never noticed it if I hadn't tracked it. And now, like, just reflecting back on that and hearing all the different ways that you track your own visibility opportunities, I'm like, ooh, there's just so much more room to like play around with it and like figure out what works, what I want to spend more time in. Like, I'm kind of excited. I'm like nerding out about this right now.
Yeah, and I can share it with you too, so you can look at it. It's like, I mean, you could probably add more to it as well, but it's been a really great way to build your strategy around it, right? Like for me personally, I realized that my speaking engagements, like the higher paid ones, always never really come from social media, right? These are things like word of mouth or someone finds me. Like I've had this year, I've had 3 people or maybe 2 or 3 people, companies reach out to me and say, "I found you on Google," right? So
Mm,
SEO becomes really important, being able to be found on Google for my public speaking consulting or speaking, right? And that to me, I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think that was." I thought, "Oh yeah, social media is probably where most people find me," but it ends up being a quick Google search. They're looking for someone and I pop up, and that's really important to know as a speaker because like, okay, where am I showing up for people? And then it lets me know too, like, okay, cool, awesome. I can have fun with my content. I do have fun with my content. And it is a way for me to connect with my community. And also it's not the number one way that I get clients, that I get paid speaking engagements. Like this other stuff
yeah.
is as well. So continue to nurture. It gives you a strategy to continue to nurture whichever ones you want to continue to grow in.
It really does. And it is nice to see that other systems and other marketing avenues are working on top of just social media because we can feel a lot
Yeah,
of pressure to be showing up all the time. And it's like, well, you can if you're enjoying it, if it's working, but there's also other things you can do. Like you mentioned, like SEO, quick Google search, like optimize your website, get into blog writing if that's a thing. Like, oh,
totally.
there's so many different ways.
Totally, totally.
Really cool.
Um,
I can dive into the next question if we'd like. Alrighty. So this one wasn't fully submitted, but I found something on Threads from a friend of mine who was sharing their own journey on launching a YouTube channel and basically using that as a way to enter their own speaker era. And the question that they were kind of like asking themselves that they shared, I thought was so relatable because I've totally gone through this process myself. So the question was how to balance scripting with speaking off the cuff. And specifically, they were concerned that their personality would just like go out the door if they're following a script. But then speaking off the cuff usually means you don't hit every single point you want to. I feel like that's very real. I've struggled and gone back and forth between scripts and no scripts for so many years. And I feel like there's a different season for each one, or depending on what you prefer and how your brain works. But Yvonne, would you like to answer and give some advice on this question?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts here because it depends on the scenario, right? I'll give you an example of something that I started doing when we first transitioned into completely virtual, right? So I was working in tech, I was doing my comms thing, and part of my role was organizing our all hands meeting, and I was the MC of it, and I would host it and and like prepare the speakers and all of that. And when it transitioned into being virtual, that made me so much more nervous because I was like, oh, I can no longer look at you for the cue of, all right, moving on. Let me go on stage, take the mic and like transition and move on. And also we needed to be a lot more efficient. So something that I did was I would write my notes and I would still bullet them, right? But if there were certain things that for example, I would memorize transitions. Transitions are always really important to for me to memorize because I know that I nerd out about people's content, and I want to make sure that I don't ramble on and take up too much space before going on to the next thing. So transitions are always the things that I try to memorize. So I would have the literal transition from one speaker to the other right there because it wasn't about me, right? I didn't need to add anything. I added a little oomph to it, but really it was just a connection piece from one speaker to the other. So I would have the transition right under my webcam, and it looked like I was looking at the audience, but I would just read it so that I didn't spend any time, right? But when you're thinking about an actual speech and a presentation, that's a little bit different. Virtually, you can have your notes up, and I suggest having headers. Headers for the main things that you want to say, but putting exact sentences for those things that you absolutely know that you don't want to miss out on saying. For example, if it's a fact or if it's something that has to do with your brand, like say it out loud, right? If that is a phrase that I want to have be a part of this particular bucket of information, then I don't want my nerves or my excitement about just talking to get in the way of me strategically placing that there. So create bullets for the main topics in your transitions, but write out exact sentences of the things that you do want to say. That's if you're doing it virtually. Um, One of the best ways to ensure that even if you are memorizing, that you're still you is to continue practicing it, right? I'll give an example of my Shark Tank audition, right? There is a way that I rehearsed it and I kept saying it over and over and over again. So certain phrases stuck. And the main things that I wanted to say had to stick because I needed to say them, right? But I still remained true to my essence because they shifted a little bit. It was the act of practicing it over and over and over again that helped me memorize and internalize it, but didn't dilute me and my personality while I was on there. So I think there's also this sometimes misunderstanding of memorization means that it's stale. Memorization means that it's not as you or as authentic when that really isn't true. At least I don't think so.
No, I like that you brought that up because there's also a difference between what it is that you're memorizing. Because if you're trying to memorize, let's say, somebody else's script, or you're trying to memorize a line in a book or a play or a movie, that might feel more forced because it's not your words to begin with, it's not your story. But if you're memorizing your own script, your own lesson, your own training, as long as you write it in a way that feels very natural, it feels like the way that you would typically talk if you did not have a script, then you're just memorizing yourself. So
Yeah.
there's nothing inauthentic about that. Like it's literally the best way to go about it.
Yeah. And like memorize, like try to practice with that emotion there. Because I think where it becomes this transition from these are my words, so it's authentically me, and now I'm just repeating the things that I was saying, is this connection, this emotional connection in your voice inflection when you're actually saying it, right? So when you're actually practicing this out loud, you need to also practice the body movements that go with it, the nonverbals that go with it, the voice inflection, because what you're saying is impactful and important, but it's the way that you're saying it that is very much uniquely yours, right? And so when you are practicing it and memorizing, it's important to also incorporate these practices of voice inflection and where do I want to actually emphasize this and where is this an emotional connector that I want to have with my audience? And can I make sure that I continue to have this emotional response, or this emotional kind of tone to what I'm saying? Um, because I don't know if y'all have ever, I mean, I'm sure y'all have seen where people will go up and do a speech. And they're like, I had this speech prepared and I went over it so many times, but I'm just going to speak from the heart.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, they're speaking from the heart, but that is discrediting all the time that you already spent practicing and saying what you have on that paper out loud. So technically, you memorized it already. Technically, you've had practice with saying this, right? And so I will go back to, it's really in your practice of it. Once you start to practice it, those things will become very much top of mind. And again, if there is something that you absolutely do not want to forget to say, then practice it. Like, quit looking at the paper, practice without looking at the paper, but make sure that you're like, okay, right after I say this one thing, I want to make sure that I place this stat in there, or that I mention this story, right? And so create almost like that outline in your minds, and know that because you've already practiced it, memorization is our, even if you decide, I'm going to throw this paper away, I'm just going to speak from the heart. Yeah, you're speaking from the heart, but not really. Like, you already practiced it some a little bit there. Try to incorporate some of that into your next speech, so that it doesn't feel like stale. Because I think that's what feels, ugh, it's like, gosh, this is stale because you've listened to it so many times.
100%. We become like our own worst critic. And I know it's not meant this way, but the whole comment, or like the segue that people use where it's like, I'm going to speak from the heart. It's like, well, whatever you already practiced, that not from the heart as well? It's just, it's
I
starting
mean,
to feel
yeah, yeah, yeah,
stale.
yeah.
That's the
And
only problem.
yeah, and even that, there's this book that I was reading that talks all about performance, right? And it tells you, like, yes, people are authentically sharing from the heart, but it is also, again, they've already practiced it. That was from the heart as well. But we have this idea that if I continue to rehearse it over and over and over, then it's not authentic, then I'm acting. And these were your words to begin with, right? So again, I think the secret or the magic will be in actually practicing it, incorporating best practices and moments of really paying attention to your nonverbals and voice inflection when you are practicing it, so that it doesn't become this just monotone thing, and you're
Yeah.
able to really hear your voice add the emotion back into it.
hmm I think overall, like you shared like such amazing different angles, and we even like riffed off on top of each other. So I'll keep my 2 cents a little bit brief. The angle that I would address this question is for folks who are public speaking in a way where you're sharing a training, where there's a lesson, there's a takeaway. And in those instances, if let's say whether it's pre-recorded or live, what I would really focus on is when you have your bullet points, and then same bullet points as the suggestion as a piece of advice, is to focus on those takeaways. I know that it can feel like a lot of pressure to sound smart and to add value and all the things. But at the end of the day, you could teach on a lot of things. You have so many years of experience. You probably supported a lot of clients. You supported yourself. But what really helps make a talk or an interview impactful is the ability for folks to learn something and to be able to take away and likely even implement, even if it's just one small thing, so that they feel like they just succeeded in a way, that they just grew, that they accomplished something. So when you keep those as your bullet points, it's like, okay, what do I want the main takeaway to be? What do I want people to learn through this lesson, through this training? Then you can stay focused on helping your community, on helping the audience, and that can keep it very on track. And when you think about it, anything else that you share in between, they could be stories, they could be examples, they could be analogies that you want to use to help illustrate and really drive that lesson and that message home. Those are usually a little bit easier to just riff off the cuff, because they're stories that you've already known, that you've already shared, that you've already experienced. So it's not so much about teaching a very specific thing with, like, let's say 5 steps and it has a specific process or journey. It's like, no, let's just relax. Let's tell the story. Let's just hang out as if we are chatting over a little like asadito and just having a couple bites and snacks and a glass of wine. Like, it can be a lot more less structured, and there can be a lot less pressure when you're telling that story. And then that way you can fill those in without having to follow this script and have this big thing that you're now reading, and it feels a little bit stuffy and like you're losing the personality and the momentum and the energy. So I think those would be the 2 cents when it comes to doing a more formal training.
And I love that because I think that transitions us into some of the topics that we'll touch on for this next question, which is what books, sources do you recommend that helped you become an impactful speaker?
Okay. So if I were to answer this first, I don't currently read anything that's business related. I'm in my big, for the past like 6 months almost, I'm in my big like fantasy romantasy era. So I've been reading
And
a
you read
lot
like
of,
7 books a day.
I do like not literally, but almost. I think the most that I read was a series of 8 books. It was Throne of Glass. It was my second kind of like getting my feet wet into the whole like fantasy realm. And I read that in 2 months. So it was literally like a book every 3 days or 4 days, something like that. I've never read that fast. But that means that I'm not reading anything business, self development, public speaking. I'm honestly not even listening to podcasts either, because I find that I'm either very focused on work or very focused on my son. But what I will say is, a couple years ago, I was very deep in my, hey, let's grow, let's learn, let's absorb other ways of thinking and doing things from other sources. And my journey was leading me to grow a lot myself when it came to my own confidence. I always felt that I was a very confident person. I always came off very confident. That's what people tend to say about me. But inside, I feel like I would still struggle so much, and I wouldn't be able to trust myself as much as I wanted to. There was a lot of self doubt there. So, for example, when it came to public speaking, I was holding myself back from pitching to different opportunities. And instead, I was hiding behind my own ego and my own insecurities and just waiting for other people to invite me, which luckily I had already built enough of a brand as a public speaker that yes, the invites were coming, but I wanted to do so much more. And I wasn't taking the action that I wanted to in order to make that happen. So I literally spent months and months and months listening to this one specific podcast. I'm trying to remember the actual name. Bank on Her by Mackenzie Conklin, and it's all confidence related. It's all about building up your self belief, your self trust. And it was just a really cool experience to be able to consume these bite sized riffs and talks about trusting yourself and about working on your beliefs and being able to feel so certain about yourself that now you're going to go ahead and take action towards the things that you want to do in your own terms. So that was probably one of the most recent journeys that I had that really allowed me to step even deeper into my own identity as a public speaker.
Love that. I mean, I think I have to agree. I am not much into I had a phase where I was like, "Oh," I think we all do, where we think, "Oh, I have to watch like self-development. I have to go and read that book by Daniel Carnegie," right? Like all of these public speakers that you think you're supposed to follow. So, I one of the things that I know to be true is that public speaking is all about storytelling, and that storytelling is actually the thing that connects us to one another, and to be impactful is to be a connector, and to be a connector means that you're a communicator and that you are a storyteller. And so a lot of the stuff that I consume are stories, right? So as far as podcasts, like I love Latino USA just for the historical, more political kind of content. Radio Ambulante always shares incredible stories. Like I just love listening to other people share stories. I love understanding the way that stories are put together and the different formats that they can take. And that makes you a better public speaker because then you can get creative with the way that you tell a story. A story isn't just beginning, middle, and end. A story is nonlinear. A story is wherever you want to take it, as long as you're taking it somewhere that brings you back to this connection. And that's what I think provides impact. Now, if you're looking for skill sets of public speaking, one of the things that I always do, and I do this with the people that I work with as well, is there is really truly not a lot out there that combines the essence of our cultura's styles of storytelling and public speaking, right? So something that I always find myself having to do is when I go to the libraries, I pick up a book on public speaking, but then I also pick up one on Chicano psychology, or I pick up one on indigenous communities in Arizona, right? And the combination of those things, we have to do a little bit extra work, right? But I combine the best practices and the essence and the storytelling of those things to form new ideas around being an impactful public speaker. Because to me, being impactful is about being, one, true to who you are and showing up in that way, but also being like, oh, my cultura backs me up with this knowledge. And if we're not actively seeking it out there and combining it with what we see be public speaking best practices, then we're not going to ever feel like an impactful speaker. If it's founded on these beautiful stories, I think that's what makes us more impactful. Because anybody, you can go and Google, what should I do with my hands when I speak? But no one's going to really tell you about when you're telling a story of your lineage, of your history, of your cultura. There's this natural movement that your body will take, and that is what creates this impact, right? But you don't know what you don't know. And if you think that public speaking is this one way of thinking, or this one thing that you have to do and this one skill set, you're not going to be as impactful as you could be because you're missing out on this entire layer of your identity. So to me, it's a combination of consuming books and content and looking at sources where traditional knowledge is telling me it's one way, but then being like, oh, there's so much knowledge that isn't recognized, cultural knowledge that isn't recognized as being best practices. And you know, what is it? What is the word that I'm looking for? Um, just mainstream. So we have to do a little bit of work. Eventually, maybe one day, I'll write a book about it. And so maybe there will be this one source. But for now, we have to do a little bit more work when it comes to that, because our impact really comes from tapping into those stories that we often don't share, don't tell, or don't know that it's okay to share.
There is something in the air in the universe right now. There's like something happening below the scenes because I've been throughout your entire riff just now, I've been dying to say something and you kind of said it. At the beginning, you started your riff by saying there's not really a resource, there isn't anything like this out there. And my brain immediately went, well, Yvonne, you are the resource. Like public speaking con cultura, that is literally you. And I was gonna say, maybe you haven't written a book, but you're the resource. And I'm like, wait, this is, whether you're going to write a book irrelevant or not, but this is
One
happening.
day.
Like,
Yeah, one day, one day. I mean, I think this is like this is what I do, why I do what I do, right?
mhm.
Because I spent so many years mastering whatever the art of public speaking was and being like, there's still something missing. And what's missing in my impact is really acknowledging and giving credit to all of the fact that I'm a great storyteller, right? Because we all are. Storytelling is for all of us. Public speaking is for all of us. Is because yeah, sure, I've studied it. I've this is what I've done, right, for many, many years. But it's also because I've learned to tap into my cultura, right? The people before us have so many stories to share, and the way that they told them tells us that informs our public speaking. Like if you could sit there and listen, I always say this, I could sit there and listen to my grandma when she was still here and tell the same story over and over and over again. And I was deeply engaged. One, I had a lot of respect for her and I didn't want to get like smacked, but also she was engaging. Right. And there's something that I can learn about my grandma and her style of communication and the way that she maintains engagement. that I can bring on me with me on stage, something that a book isn't going to teach me about, something that listening to a podcast isn't going to teach me about. So a source for impactful public speaking could also be the people around you. It's like, what do they do to keep you engaged?
Hmm.
How did they tell this story and it made you laugh? So what did they do? How did they fit that joke in there? Right? What was the context of that? Um, Studying those moments, like not being so annoying that now I feel like this is something that I do. Now I'm like, ooh, that was beautiful the way you said that. Like my friends are probably annoyed at me about that. But notice, right? Notice the things that I don't, like Steph, your son, right? Like the way that they communicate or the way that they tell a story, right? There's something so beautiful about everybody's different style of communication. And that's where we can learn from. We
Yeah.
learn from one another because we're all human and we want to be talked to and spoken to like we're human.
Yeah. What's really, really interesting is that every little bit that we've shared for this specifically, it's all about learning from sources that have nothing to do directly with public speaking. And it is so interesting because no matter the topic, even if you're talking about business and entrepreneurship in a more general sense, or you talk about like your career trajectory, like you can learn for so many reasons, for so many things in ways that are indirect, that aren't always, hey, let me enroll inside of a course or go to school for this or earn a diploma. Like those are all great ways of furthering your education, but there's so many other things that we can tap into just in the day-to-day life. Like even just one last one that was coming to mind. One of my friends is a radio host, and they literally just last night invited me to come check out how they do their work and check out the studio. And I'm like, that would actually be really cool, because every time I get into the car, I know it's also because it's one of my friends. So I think there's that extra layer where, oh my goodness, it's so cool to be listening to my friend on the radio while I'm just randomly doing some errands. But I find myself smirking in like a good way, where I'm like, oh, that was a funny thing that was just shared. That was an interesting fact. Oh, I just learned about some celebrity that did some cool charity event. And I'm like, that's literally public speaking. And here I am experiencing this so naturally, so organically, and I'm learning. So to be able to then go to the studio, I think that's going to be such a cool thing. So who knows? If it happens down the line, maybe we'll incorporate that into one of the pieces of advice in a future episode, because I think there could definitely be a lot of takeaways, at least for myself there. But yeah, literally, you get to learn and develop and enhance your skills and grow as a public speaker through everyday life. It doesn't have to be too complicated. You just have to like open up your eyes to the possibilities.
Totally. Because that's your foundation, right? If that's your foundation of understanding of public speaking, I think it creates less of barrier between yourself and public speaking. It creates a foundation of this is rooted in me. This is rooted in what I can observe about the world. And then I can start implementing these very specific techniques that I know work. Then I can start really thinking about what is the structure of this particular story, right? Like I always tell I always love to tell people that when we work together, like I don't want you to think about your favorite public speakers, right? Like don't even think I don't have public speaking idols. I don't think I have people that I look up to in public speaking, because I remember when I first started my journey, it was a lot about comparison, right? I was like, okay, and it's the thing that made me feel like I had to assimilate to a certain type of public speaker. And so if I can intercept in that process
Yeah.
before you start Googling, before you start comparing yourself, start with what already is around you and what you want to be rooted in and what you want your stories and storytelling and expertise to be rooted in. And then you can start picking up from other people too, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all a mosaic of one another and the interactions that we have with each other, right? So like having this being grounded on who you are first and how you want to show up and the things that you do know, and then being like, okay, now I can learn a little bit more here. Now I can work on this particular technique that I've been trying to perfect. Um, yeah, I love this topic.
I'm going to pull at you and say that was really beautifully said. Like you said the mosaic part, and I was like, oh, damn. I'm like, can we just end the episode here? That was beautiful.
Thank you. I've been working on I've been working on something, and mosaic is my is like the center piece of it. So I feel like it's like a I've been working on a speech, and the mosaic is It's kinda like we're yes, that's the it's a signature topic in the process of being developed.
I love it. You can tell that you're already integrating it. It's rolling off the tongue. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Um, cool.
Wicked.
Well, this was a fun episode. I feel like we are can most definitely, I actually kinda have fun. I was kind of coming into it being like, "I'm so tired, maybe what if my energy is off because 'cause I'm, like, not feeling it today?"
Mhm.
But this really re-energized me, so thank you, Steph, and
I
thank
love
you to
that.
those of you that submitted questions.
I wonder if it's also the fact that we're just in our comfies and we're not, it's not that we're not trying, but there's less intention. So it allows you to just be in the moment as opposed to sometimes a preparation. Not always, but sometimes it already puts you in a specific track. Whereas this allows you to just more organically go with the flow, which a lot of the times can bring in more of that fun.
Totally. And I want to encourage everybody that's listening to you can submit questions about anything,
Yeah.
literally anything, right? This is meant to be a behind the scenes type of thing. So if you have any curiosity questions, if you have more technical questions, obviously always please ask them. If you have more process questions like, hey, what kinds of questions should I ask someone if I'm going to speak? What kinds of things should I know about being on a stage or being taking the virtual stage? Like what kinds of things and how can I prepare? Please feel free to ask any and all of those questions, even if you think they're too specific to what you've got going on. I'm sure someone else has a similar question, and we would love to help answer that.
Yeah, I think the more specific it's almost the better because you can get so not just specific with the answer, but I feel like at least for us as hosts, it allows us to really diversify our content and the advice that we share. Because the broader the question, it's almost like you can just say anything. But when it gets
Like
specific,
general.
it's like, oh, exactly. But general. When it gets specific, it's like, no, no, no. Okay, let me like roll up my sleeves. Like we got this, and
Yeah.
it brings off like a different kind of energy. It feels very purposeful. So I almost love even more the specific questions. But yeah, anyway, like Yvonne
Yeah.
said, this is your invitation, your permission slip, if you will. We have a form, we make it easy for you. You can just submit your question. If you want to record your question as well and like practice your own public speaking kind of like identity and step into that role, feel free to do so, but it's not mandatory. But anyway, we're really excited to just get more of your questions, to connect with you. If you want to reach out on Instagram, we're more than happy to just get to know you better and amplify you as a speaker in whatever way that we can.
Awesome. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next month.
Ciao.